Cool. All right. So members of the committee are hereby advised of their duty under the State Government Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest, are instructed to refrain from participating in any matter coming before this committee with respect to which there is a conflict of interest. All right. So tell me, Brian, did I miss? We do not have a specific agenda at all, like we
That's
discussed,
correct.
right?
That's correct. I think the purpose of this meeting was to just kind of have a conversation initially with everyone on the committee about where we think this inquiry should go, some initial steps that we might want to take. As far as we talked about this at the big meeting. Do we want to issue an opinion? Do we need to educate ourselves more? Is there another consideration? Maybe it's all of the above. And so the purpose, like I said, is just to kind of talk, get everybody's feel for, a couple of these different things. I do want to get the committee's feedback, subcommittee's feedback on whether or not you all think an opinion that's broad would be helpful at this time. And just to kind of give that background, and you saw this in your prior meeting materials, of course, we discussed it at the July meeting. The option is out there that we could draft an opinion that's similar to the article that is being published this quarter. There are some underlying principles that are applicable to this question, especially when you view artificial intelligence as yet another tool, another service or software program, whatever you want to call it, that a lawyer can use to increase efficiency in the practice, to benefit the client, et cetera. And we do have some existing opinions out there, specifically from 2008 and 2011, that talk about different scenarios lawyers face, putting stuff in the cloud or just software as a service in general. And of course, all of those opinions answer the question: yes, lawyers can use that stuff. You just have to do it competently, and you have a duty to vet which one is going to be most appropriate. Cloud computing is such a great example because, yeah, there's a lot of cloud servers out there, but you don't want to just put your confidential client information anywhere. You need to take the steps to make sure that whatever you're using to protect the information is secure, et cetera. And so there's an option here to draft an opinion that frankly could be drafted fairly quickly and reviewed, because it's just really hitting on the underlying principles, even if it is essentially reiterating points that have previously been made by the ethics committee in this new context. I'll tell you, I don't see her joining just yet. She may join a little bit later, but I spoke with one of our Wake County judges recently, Ashley Parker Dunstan. Actually, Marley and I did. And if you can't see, Marley, our State Bar intern, has joined us because she's interested in this topic. But we actually sat down and talked with Judge Dunstan last week. And I think if she were here, she would tell you that yes, she does think it'd be very helpful to have an opinion on that topic, even if it doesn't get into specifics of can you use Chat GPT? Can you use Lexis Plus, which I just got an email for last week, being announced, and all these other ones that are coming up. I think, just generally speaking, I'm going to advise the subcommittee to not tackle one particular or a specific program, because those programs tend to evolve, and our opinion, any statement on it, could be out of date very quickly. But she was explaining that there's a lot of questions that are coming up to her on the bench, both amongst the colleagues on the bench as well as her interaction with lawyers, about what can a lawyer do. We've seen some of those reactions. You saw this in the article that I had drafted, that a Texas judge went and issued I guess a requirement that all lawyers certify that whatever they're filing is not drafted by artificial intelligence or with the assistance of artificial intelligence. And so, there's these questions of, well, what type of orders do we need? Do local rules need to be amended and so forth? And her perspective was basically that it would be nice if the State Bar issued some sort of statement about artificial intelligence. And, perhaps if our conclusion is, as we'd put in a previous ethics advisory opinion that was in your materials, as well as in that drafted article, that there's no strict prohibition about using artificial intelligence. But if you're going to use it, you need to do so competently, exercise appropriate safeguards for confidentiality and all the different considerations there. So that's, to me, kind of the first thing that I would like to get some feedback on. And just as a preview, like I said before, the second thing is really kind of the other direction of this program. I don't think we necessarily need to end there because there's, I guess I'll speak for myself. I know I spoke with Warren about this. Warren, you could probably weigh in here, but there are so many different developments that we hear of. We just hear artificial intelligence in general, but there are so many specific programs out there that do very different things. And before we fully get our grasp on exactly what the ethics committee thinks it should do about maybe particular processes and how it interacts with the practice of law, perhaps we'd want to educate ourselves more. And we have a lot of people in this state that are very involved in these different processes and the development thereof. Particularly, I'm thinking Centennial Campus is full of LexisNexis folks. You know, they're just around the corner. And I think we can bring some of these folks in to tell us what they see for the current state of this technology and integration in the law practice, as well as the future, which is probably hard to predict, but at least it gives you some sort of idea there. And I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over my words right now because I think Warren is drinking out of a Prince mug that I just noticed. Well done, Warren. All right, so that's my spiel. I'd love to get your thoughts. Maybe let's start with the opinion, the broad opinion, just articulating some of the principles of lawyers' responsibilities in using any new software, but particularly artificial intelligence. What would our conclusion be? Is that something that you think would be helpful to the lawyers that you interact with?
So if you don't mind me jumping in, I talked to Ashley Parker Dunstan, Judge Dunstan, last week too. She's concerned and wants us to come out with something. I'm not saying she controls us, but she's concerned about us wanting to come out with something soon, so that we don't see some reaction like that Texas judge in North Carolina, where somebody half-cocked some judge reads a New York Times article about somebody not knowing how to use AI, and then they just ban its use for any lawyer that appears in their courtroom or in their county or whatever. She's concerned about that, mostly because there are a lot of good ways that potentially it could be used, and just thinks that would be she's concerned about that happening soon, given all the questions that are out there. I'm in agreement that we should do that if we can before October, or for the October meeting. I think that I looked at the ethics advisory opinion that we did for machine learning, and fusing that one with Brian's article, we ought to be able to come up with a pretty darn general but encouraging and helpful thing for lawyers to know that, you know, they should and they can explore the use of AI. They just need to do it and figure out how to make it work. I sent an old ethics opinion to Brian earlier this past week that I found that I think is the least useful and helpful ethics opinion that the state bar has ever issued. And it was prior to Y2K, some lawyer asked, you know, do I need to worry about what bank I'm in, given the all my trust accounts are in, given that Y2K is coming up? And I'm not kidding. The answer was yes. Period. It was just like, what? It was the worst.
Was that before Alice? That had to have been before Alice.
Yeah, I was gonna say we used to prioritize eloquence and brevity. So that's
it was crazy. It may have finished that sentence with "yes, you should," but I mean, it was just like, yes, you should worry about that. It's a problem. So anyway, I do. I would encourage us to look at that at least first, for getting ahead of that in October, coming to some consensus for amongst our group so we can present that. But then, and I'd love to hear from everybody else, but then also kind of try to figure out sort of what do we want to do. I feel like AI is coming at us. It's going to come at us quick, with a lot of different questions. And if every time a new question comes, Brian and Nicole and the staff have to reform a new committee that has to get re-educated on everything, has to look at it in a different light. I'm not saying we should, have some star chamber amongst this group that lasts forever, but my point being is there's some sort of dedicated group to keeping up with these, as I think they will come. Not necessarily recommending a standing committee, but just trying to figure out what are we talking about and how does that get done. And with that said, I don't have any answers to that question, and would certainly like to hear from you guys.
I like framing it in the context of cloud software, security software, because I think that's something that a lot of lawyers who will say, oh, AI, I don't know anything about that. But that's an easy way to kind of connect it and make it to something that lawyers who may not be logging on to Chat GPT, but they can understand, oh, I'm still responsible for this information. I feel like that's a rule that, I hope everybody can agree on. Like, if you're going to use a software, you're responsible for what it puts out. And I like using, one of y'all said, marrying the article with the cloud software opinion. And I think that's the most helpful thing going forward. But I feel like I need to educate myself more, but I agree. That's just going to be years and years and years of it. And it's going to keep changing. So I'm wary of saying anything too specific. But if we want to, I guess, head off at the front what that Texas judge did, I think that's the way to go, is put something out there that says, all the other rules still apply. Don't forget that you're a lawyer, and put something really broad out there. I kind of was leaning that direction myself.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the piece that you shared with us in Asheville, Brian, was good in that it was fairly broad, and this is a landscape that's changing dramatically, seems like with every passing day. So I think if you're talking about poll stars to guide by, those 10 or 11 things that you had incorporated in that piece, I thought were very helpful in terms of navigating what's probably likely to arise in this changing environment. I think, and I'll just mention this, and I don't know if it's something that's come across anybody else's radar screen, but back in time when we were first working on computers as lawyers, there was a system called WordPerfect and a system called Word. And as I think we all know now, WordPerfect went the way of the dinosaur, and now Word is the thing that we all use. And I was in a meeting last week with a bunch of law firms around the country, and I've not gone on to this yet, but something that's called co-counsel apparently is getting tremendous traction among lawyers right now. And I think it's just something that bears watching. As a couple of you said, you don't know who to bet on in this race, but at least in terms of maybe in the first furlong of the race, at least among bigger firms, it seems like co-counsel is the thing that people are gravitating toward. But I think I'll just kind of underscore what I think has been kind of the theme so far, which is get word out sooner rather than later, and try to paint with a broad brush so that people can understand where the guardrails are at this point.
I'll just quickly add, I think for the record, WordPerfect was better than Word. I liked WordPerfect, just going to say. So can I ask the question then, do we all agree that the general answer on this issue, at least right now, if we answered it very broadly, like we're talking about, answering the question, can I, a lawyer, use artificial intelligence in my practice? That the answer is yes. You just need to be careful. And we can clearly, it's much more nuanced than that. But
Right.
that there's no, does anybody feel like the answer at this point should be no, you absolutely cannot and should not use artificial intelligence?
Ellen and Laurie and Kevin, what do y'all think?
Lori, I see you're muted.
There you go. Huh. You're still mute.
Okay. Can you hear me now that I have my
Yep.
headset
Yes.
on?
There you
Okay,
go.
sorry. I just got this and I forget that it's there. So I think it's a great supplement to people's practices. I think that we need to remind people that it's only a supplement. It's not going to take over your practice. It's not the only thing that you're going to have to use now. You actually do still need to open the law books and check your sites and make sure that if you use it for discovery or cross-examination questions, that it's relevant to what you actually need. And so yeah, I think a broad rule is great, but and I agree with Brian that we don't know enough to make a more specific rule at this time. And I love the idea of becoming more educated with it. I had actually met with a Westlaw rep just this week, and she was presenting new options that they have, and they're working on the AI portion of it, but they already have something that I didn't know they have. Some of you may know that you can put your brief or your legal memo into their system, and it can cite check everything for you and let you know if you've left out any case law. It checks for misspellings, and so there's an AI portion to it already, but they're trying to enhance it, and they're not sure yet though when it's coming out. So I'd imagine Ellen knows about it because the law schools have more cutting edge information than most of us lawyers do. And we just got a new associate who said that she was trained in really the top Westlaw program, which has some AI components.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common in law schools. We get the preference is strong if they learn it in law school, and then they take the desire to use those tools into practice. I agree with everything that has been said in terms of doing an opinion in a quick fashion with a broad brush. The only area that immediately comes to mind where I can see us in 3 weeks saying, how are we going to deal with this issue and I think there's an easy answer, but I think we need to acknowledge it. It is not just what AI outputs, but what lawyers are inputting into AI. And again, I think there's a straightforward answer there, but I think any opinion needs to take that into account as well.
You mean the confidentiality aspect to that?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I heard something. I have no idea. I hear stuff all the time, and they're not voices in my brain. But so when the original ChatGPT 4 came out, whatever this new version is that's been so powerful, that it was a closed environment for information. It was internet stuff on the internet as of some date, 2021, right? And nothing after that. And I've heard that since that time, as it has, as subsequent AI vehicles have put more and more stuff in post that ChatGPT 4 version, that now it's getting less and less accurate. I'm like what was 90% accurate now is 80% accurate. Those are numbers I heard. I have no idea if any of that's true, but that's concerning to me too. On the I have no idea what measurement they are saying is accurate, but I just thought that was interesting. Kevin, you were like our IT guy. What do you know about this stuff, man?
Particular piece, but I would think that would be a good reason to bring in the folks like Brian was talking about Centennial campus wise and try to get some input from those that are on the front lines on the computer technology part. Because most software, as it grows, it's going to be dependent on the inputs it receives as to how it grows and how it alters based on that. So I would say there's at least a chance that that could be somewhat accurate. Ultimately, from the other parts, I would agree with the broad opinion initially, and that it is something that we should say, yes, that you can use. I don't think it's much different than if you use Lexis or Westlaw to get some cases to look at. You don't just print out that page and hand it to a judge. You still look through the cases, make sure they're actually on point, make sure the holding is relevant to your case and so forth. It would be the same type of logic using AI. I think the little bit of difference is it can produce a larger volume of material much more quickly than Lexis or Westlaw, the basic models. Right after our meeting in July, I had a PC hearing in Superior Court the next week on a DWI. I just plugged in some information, and the little quick memo it spat out to me was very overlapping with what I had already put together from years of experience dealing with DWIs. The same cases, the correct citations, I did check to make sure, all of those different pieces, but that's something that came back within 45 seconds. So that's an immensely powerful tool that I also don't see as that much different than a senior associate going to a junior associate or to an intern and saying, put me together a memo on this topic. You're basically just asking the AI to do virtually the same thing, but you're still going to be expected to review it and make sure that it's accurate before you pass it on to anybody else. But that's where I think the broad opinion is a good start for a couple of reasons. One, so we can get ahead of things, but two, we've all noticed from different subcommittee meetings, once we get the draft opinion and we start pulling it apart, we also start seeing this is where we could get an issue down the road, or this is a potential issue right now that we want to add into that opinion. And I think we can go ahead and start that process, but I also think we should get some of that input from the technology side, whether it's directly from the school or from some of the businesses that are participating in that area right now.
Another place that I foresee us getting questions very soon will be in the authorized practice of law area too, and how people who are not lawyers use this to either help themselves or help others. It's going to be an interesting thing, especially after what you described there, Kevin, spitting out a fairly convincing and good memo in 45 seconds. It might be helpful, but I can imagine somebody selling that service to people and then we being very unhappy about that as far as a regulatory thing.
Warren, I've got a question for you. Obviously, you're in a business where this has got to be something that's top of mind. It's something that I would think your counterparts across the country are concerned about and probably wanting to get ahead of the curve on. What is the kind of scuttlebutt for folks that are in the world that you ply your trade in?
From my perspective, I feel like it's going to be a helpful thing for most for lawyers, and it is not just helpful, it's going to be revolutionary in a lot of ways. Things that I do foresee as far as a risk, and that we've talked about some, is sort of the sophistication of scams of lawyers is going to go through the roof. They can, they're not just, they can have real-time conversations with you now in AI that are going to get more and more hard to ferret out whether you're being scammed or not. and then, and I guess I can just imagine that the extent of, never underestimate how badly a lawyer can screw up a case, but that some of those screw ups will be that much more, go that much longer without being discovered necessarily if you're not doing the work, and if you're not aware of how this stuff works, and you're just digging yourself deeper and deeper and deeper with something. But I frankly, it was you, Craig, talking about this co-counsel thing. Right now, Chat GPT is not developed for lawyers to use, right? It's developed for everybody to use for everything that they can imagine and try to use it. Things like co-counsel and I think there's a couple other of these platforms. To me, I think they're trying to develop things for law firms to use in a much more secure way, in a way that some of my concerns about risk and the depth of mistakes will be that could be potentially made, could be taken care of. I mean, I feel like that's a big thing. I mean, nuclear technology can be used for evil, but it can be used for good as long as it's right. You use it in the right way. So I don't know. That's sort of what I feel. I know that there's a national legal malpractice conference coming up here in October. Like, I think a whole half a day is dedicated to AI and what that means for the legal profession, and there'll be a lot of lawyer insurance companies listening to that too, I'm sure.
Well, Warren, I think I'll point out, I think the opinion would need to distinguish between the different considerations when you're dealing with a public AI program and a private one, because people can have these kind of in-house programs developed that are very helpful to their specific. That was the question that was asked to the committee, 2-3 years ago, that resulted in that ethics advisory opinion. It was something that was very specific, but then there was also a tinge of, well, if we send this information outside for pure statistical analysis, because then you can plug in almost, I guess, the client identification information has been stripped away, and now you just have data. So what are the confidentiality concerns there and things of that nature? And so there's a lot of nuance there, but I think it sounds like there's a consensus that yes, we want to pursue drafting a broad opinion, and the opinion essentially is going to be taking the position that you lawyers, you can use AI just like you can use so many other things, but you need to be mindful of these different considerations. And I think that's where I'll use the article as a framework, as well as there may be some other things. I know there was something I'll just tell you early on. There was almost like a question of conflicts, like with the notion of how much more advanced and sophisticated this stuff is. If you plug in your information, your client's information into one program, is that somehow going to get learned and used by the opposing counsel, or whatever it might be? And I think I've satisfied myself that that's not something that really we're talking about. I think somebody described it, Jeff Kelly, who's with Nelson Mullins and is very much on top of this stuff. He works with Duke University School of Law as well. Basically said, the information we put into these programs is like throwing a cup of water into the ocean. So it's such a vast amount of information that's analyzing that stuff doesn't come up. But I think the opinion would draw that distinction between public and private to say public stuff, don't put client specific information. You're asking for a very generic brief, sure, but maybe not put your client's name, to actually have them draft something specific to your client and their situation, their case number, all that kind of stuff, because you really cannot fully vet the security of this stuff, particularly the public programs. But if it's a private, internal, or in-house program that's secure, just like anything else you might have that's entirely in-house, then that changes the analysis. So, but it sounds like we have a consensus to pursue an opinion. And I think, I guess want to make sure I give anybody an opportunity to object. Okay. I'll get to work on that and see if I can get something. We're going to try to schedule something. I think realistically, probably towards the middle to late part of September. I'd like to think I can get it done earlier, and as soon as I can get it to you all, then I'll send it to you. But just an initial draft that highlights these principles that really I think are going to be, they will not change, even no matter how much education we get. But then I think that's the next part of the analysis. And it sounds like we're all still interested in continuing our education on some of these specific processes to understand where the nuances are, where the potential pitfalls are for different types of processes. So we can, whether we are issuing additional opinions or whether we're issuing, additional articles, or maybe it needs to take some other form for providing lawyers with the advice they need on these specific topics that may not be in kind of, chiseled in stone ethics opinion format. That's just, we'll cross that bridge at a later point.
Me before, I'd love to be educated on what are the risks we ought to be looking for. I have a hard time even getting a picture in my head of, if we open that door, what is that opening the door to on some stuff, and the benefits on the other side, sort of, why should we, be encouraging the use of this too. I don't, I've read a few articles, but they're not in-depth articles. They're certainly not anything that I feel comfortable in feeling like I'm an expert enough to opine on things like that. But boy, I would like to see somebody tell us about some of those things, so that when we do get a specific question in those areas, maybe we are recognize that it's an issue, instead of just throwing this general opinion to them and saying, draw your own conclusions based on this. It may be something we need to do something more specific to, and we will have the knowledge to know that when the inquiry is made.
I agree with you, Warren. I think that'd be super helpful. I think it'd be helpful for me. I only can speak for myself, but if I heard from a provider about how you integrate this technology into your practice, so that whether you're a dirt lawyer like me, or a litigator, or pick a winner, regulatory lawyer, you kind of know what it is that this is capable of helping you do. Because I agree with the comment that it's yet another tool in our toolkit where we can leverage off resources to become more efficient and better at our craft. But it seems to me that that would be an important part of this overall education process, is to kind of learn, okay, how is it that we're bringing this technology to bear on the practice specifically? And Ellen, you may have people in the trade that that are trying to hook law students in early, because I know that that's certainly something that was happening when I was in law school with respect to computer research. And I can certainly find out a little bit more maybe about co-counsel and share that with Brian and Warren. But it seems like if you can kind of couple that learning process about use of the technology, which I'm kind of sensing all of us kind of have some rudimentary knowledge about, but really not specific knowledge about. And then if you were to adopt and start using this, what kind of risks are you exposing yourself and your law firm or your client to?
See, Ellen has her hand raised.
Yeah, so Brian, I don't envy you, because I think a really hard part of drafting this is defining the it. Because assuming we want to stay away from brand names, which I think makes sense, we may have to use them for reference, right? But we might not want to use ChatGPT or, UpCount, whatever the thing is. I mean, there are so many examples of AI in play today in our homes and in our chat bots, whatever that a law firm is using that people may not think of when they think of writing a brief with Chat GPT. But I think a key piece of this decision is going to be defining what it is we're talking about in a way that educates the lawyers in the state of North Carolina, right? Because I have a hard time. I mean, I tried to write an AI policy for my class this week, and it was very hard to write. And we started using, a colleague and I started trying to create this defined term of AI generated text, right? You can't use AI generated text in my class. Well, what if they put a multiple choice question in, right? You're not really, then it's AI generated work. And so I just think that's a really hard piece of this that I don't have my head around. And I just throw that out there for what it's worth.
I agree, Ellen. I think that's where I like the broad opinion is that it's something that, again, hits on principles that I think should be universally applied. But to the point of these different things, yeah, like your example, this policy, AI generated work product. I mean, even when you click to Lori, you were talking about Westlaw earlier. If you're looking at a case and you say, yes, I'd like to do this, you can click a button to copy the citation. That's an AI generative process where it's creating an accurate citation for you to then copy and paste. And so that's something that I don't know if we're going to be able to put the parameters on that as much as it's really an educational piece to lawyers, and maybe even taken as a warning, the way that those other opinions are too, that like, here's some things to think about. But there is a lot of independent professional judgment that must be exercised by lawyers. And to the specifics, all these different things, I mean, I think co-counsel sounds, I've not looked at co-counsel. I want to look at that. Case text, I know is trying to drive a lot of AI processes. We've got Lexis doing a lot of stuff. I think there's just a lot of these folks that I would like to bring in. I'd like all of us to be able to ask the questions that we want to understand the scope of where things are now, which is probably much, much larger than we even anticipate, and where it's going. But at the very least, it will put us on notice to what, like you said, Warren, better define what are the pitfalls, what are the benefits, where should we encourage, and where should we caution. So I think I feel kind of, I guess, affirmed here that I think we're all on the same page of let's get a broad opinion out that really just reiterates lawyers, use your judgment. Here's a couple of things that are going to be applicable no matter what you're using. And that should be fairly easy to turn out. Of course, famous last words. I'll send you a draft and we'll pick it apart to no end, which needs to be done. We'll go forward there. But to get that there, and I think that's what the next meeting will be focused on. But then it sounds like we're also on the same page about education. So I'm going to start reaching out to some of these folks. If you all have contacts, I know Warren sent me somebody who's over at Duke Law that did a presentation to the advocates, I believe it was over the summer, Warren.
Yeah, I'd like you to reach out to her because she had a whole section on intersection with regulation of lawyers. And where that might rubber hit the road on that. I mean, one thing I'm sitting here thinking about, Red Hat, right? Red Hat is a software company that is entirely a platform built around an entirely public operating system, right? Anybody can go and use this operating system, but Red Hat has this thing around it such that you pay Red Hat to help you use this public operating system. Well, ChatGPT, entirely public. But if somebody wants to sell the Machine Lawyer Inc. User system such that somebody can come in and pay Machine Lawyer Inc. to teach them the ways to use ChatGPT to ask it the right questions, to spit out the same answer that they might get. I mean, holy cow, we're going to get all kinds of questions here that I'm don't want to go into all of them now, but it just, while I had it on the brain, I wanted to bring that one up.
Well, I think I have a good direction. I did notice Judge Parker Dunstan did join us. I don't know, Judge, if you had anything you wanted to add.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say thank you so much for, taking this up. I had called Brian and Warren last week in a tizzy because I had left a conference of the National Conference of Bar Presidents in Denver, Colorado. And the last segment was about AI in the courts. And I was really concerned that we may have some judges who may have some hesitation if they don't know what this is. And so I did reach out to AOC, School of Government. I mean, pretty much everybody at this point, because the last thing I want is hopefully that we don't have a judge that will come down and say, I don't want this used in my courtroom, or, what happened in Texas or whatever else. And then, I mean, that's just not something that's really feasible. And so, I feel like the state bar saying something would be extremely helpful, providing some type of general guidance on just a reminder, like what you guys were talking about, just a reminder of like, hey, listen, this is important. These are the things, these are always the rules. They haven't changed no matter what happens. These are the rules. I think that will help maybe ease some heartburn of some judges. And that's just a reminder so that when that one person that messes up isn't disciplined and says, well, I didn't know anything about that. Well, here was the reminder that when you use these type of programs, the expectations for you to check behind it, not put in privileged information, et cetera, and so forth. I just think it'd be extremely helpful, not only for the members, but also for the bar, or for the bench, excuse me.
Thank you, Judge.
And remember, we'll only be publishing for comment, presumably, unless it gets sent back to the subcommittee by the full committee. We'll be publishing for comment, and maybe we'll get hopefully get some comments, especially if an opinion goes out at the same time as Brian's article talking about stuff. I mean,
yeah. Well, that'll be curious. And I'd ask everybody to provide feedback to the extent that you hear of folks that read that article. I know everybody's just every quarter. I mean, I get just bombarded with calls and emails. When's the State Bar Journal coming out? They're just chomping at the bit to read the journal. But if they do read it, that is coming out. I believe that the electronic version is going to be published either later this week or next week. And to the extent that you hear anybody that read it, let's get their feedback. Did they? I don't know. Did it have I was hoping that it would be kind of a calming sort of thing of listen, don't kind of pump the brakes on the fear, because there's a lot of strange things happening here, but we've dealt with this before as far as a new technologically capable tool that maybe we didn't even fathom. and here we are. So anyway, I would love to get feedback. That is going to come out soon, but then maybe that can be on this opinion could be on the heels, and we just kind of go from there. So nevertheless, I feel like I've got some good direction here. I'm going to start lining up the folks that we talked about. I know Warren, the person that you would suggest over at Duke, and as well as reach out to some of these other. Really, I think there's going to be a lot of local options that maybe could join us and tell us what they're working on, and help us better define whether we need to take additional steps beyond the broad article and what recommendations those might be. So I think we're good to go. Oh, I see Judge, you raise your hand.
Sorry, Ellen, I know you were talking about it for your class. Dean April Dawson is the Dean of Technology at NCCU. Have you had, I know she's working on that too.
I have not, no.
Okay, I'm happy to provide you her information because she's actually the technology dean, and she's teaching AI and the law at Central. I've tapped her for some WCBA things already. She's going to be doing a CLE for us in January. And so I'm happy to put her information in the chat for you.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. See the State Bar just bringing lots of people together to do the good work.
Right.
Look at that. All right.
One thing we should maybe think about this, not today, but in future, identify groups we should push this issue out to. I mean, real estate lawyers to litigators to in-house counsel folks to different groups, family lawyers, because Laura, you brought up the whole idea that you can get ChatGPT to write a cross-examination of an expert for you. You just plug everything in and tell it, give me my questions to cross-examine a witness. I mean, it'd be very interesting to see where people anticipate their areas of practice trying to use it and what they think about it.
Good. All right, well, Mr. Chair, I've got some direction. If you have anything else, then we can discuss, or anybody else on the subcommittee. All right.
Sorry, no, thank you. I guess with that, we should have adjourned, and I thank you very much.
All right, we'll be in touch. I'll be
Thank
sending you
you.
an opinion, and we'll be looking for a next meeting date, probably sometime mid-September or towards the later part of September. We'll be in touch.
Cool.